The Fall of the Sun King, The Final Hours of Venezuela. Part 1. The Silence Before the Storm. Imagine a city where the air is thick with the smell of salt from the Caribbean and the smoke of burning trash. It is 2 a.m. on January 3rd, 2026. Caracas, once the Paris of South America, is in a state of unnatural silence. The streetlights flicker, powered by a dying electrical grid that has been failing for a decade. For the people of Venezuela, this was just another night of hunger and fear. But above the clouds, something was moving, something loud, something that hadn't been seen in this hemisphere for decades. In the White House, a decision had been made. Operation Absolute Resolve was no longer a plan on a desk, it was a reality in the sky. Over 150 elite fighter jets and stealth bombers were crossing into Venezuelan airspace. The goal was simple, yet world-shaking. The capture of the man who had ruled this nation with an iron fist for 13 years, Nicolas Maduro. Part 2. The Ghost Economy. To understand why the world's most powerful military was knocking on Maduro's door, we have to look at the money. Venezuela is a country sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia. Yet, in 2026, it is a place where $1 million cannot buy you a loaf of bread. This is the psychology of hyperinflation. When a government prints money to solve its problems, the money ceases to be a tool and becomes a weapon of mass destruction. In the markets of Caracas, children are seen playing with stacks of cash. Not because they are rich, but because the paper is worth more as a toy than as currency. We've seen artists weaving handbags out of 100 Bolivar notes. They sell these bags for $5, making more money from the labor of weaving than the face value of the thousands of bills used to make them. When trust in a currency dies, the society reverts to the primitive. In the southern jungles, the Bolivar is a memory. Today, people pay for rice and beans with gold dust, shaved off small nuggets with pocket knives. They weigh their life savings on tiny digital scales just to buy a gallon of milk. This economic collapse wasn't just a failure of math, it was the final stage of a psychological war between a regime and its people. Part 3. Operation Absolute Resolve. The clock struck 3 a.m. The first explosions weren't in the slums, but at the heart of the regime's power, Fort Tiuna. The precision of the strikes was terrifying. Within minutes, the communication towers were gone. The Sun King of Venezuela was blind. At the presidential palace, Miraflores, the guards, some of the most feared men in the country, did something unexpected. They didn't fight. Most of them simply walked away. They too were hungry. They too had families who couldn't afford medicine. In a daring decapitation strike, U.S. Special Forces landed on the grounds. This wasn't a long, drawn-out war like Iraq or Afghanistan. It was a surgical extraction. Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, were captured in their private quarters. There were no grand speeches, no heroic last stands. By sunrise, a photo was leaked to the world. Nicolas Maduro, the man who once defied the empire, sat blindfolded and handcuffed on a U.S. Navy transport plane. Destination, New York City. Part 4. The Aftermath, A Country in Limbo. As the sun rose over Caracas on January 4th, the people awoke to a world they didn't recognize. The posters of Maduro were being torn down, not by soldiers, but by grandmothers and students. But liberation comes with a price. President Trump announced from Washington that the United States would run Venezuela until a judicious transition could be made. For some, this is a rescue. For others, it is the return of the big brother in the north. The vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, remains in hiding, calling for a national resistance. But can you lead a resistance when your soldiers are trading their uniforms for a bag of flour? Part 5. The Psychological Lesson. What can we learn from the fall of Venezuela? It teaches us that a nation is not built on oil or gold or even powerful leaders. It is built on a simple, fragile thing called trust. When you destroy the value of a man's labor by destroying his currency, you destroy his connection to his country. Venezuela didn't fall because of the jets in the sky. It fell years ago, when the first mother had to choose between buying medicine or buying food. The military strike was just the final period at the end of a long, tragic sentence. As Maduro prepares to face a judge in a New York courtroom, 28 million people are left to pick up the pieces of a broken dream. The oil is still in the ground. The sun still shines on the Caribbean. But the history of money has claimed another victim. And as we look at the headlines today, we must ask ourselves, how many other nations are just one bad economic decision away from the same fate? History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes.